The Watcher's Battle. End of section. Now, this is the dangerous movement. Because if this book has done its work, the believer who has walked it has now spent considerable time studying the figure who is the adversary. That is a thing the New Testament does, a small amount of, and warns against doing too much of, in exactly that order. Paul names the move outright, in the very passage that is the closest the New Testament gets to a self-aware caution about a book like this one. And the figure he names is the figure this book has been writing about. Worth standing under the verse before going any further. Detail about the unseen realm in itself can be sober teaching. The same detail, when the believer's grip on the head is loosening, is the next move trap. Paul does not say no one should ever talk about visions or angels. He says no one should let the conversation be the kind that ends with someone puffed up and floated free of the head. The detail Paul does name is striking. Going on in detail, embateon, the verb for treading into, entering at length, dwelling in, about visions. Puffed up, physiumenos, the verb for being inflated, the same word he uses elsewhere for the knowledge that puffs up while love builds up, 1 Corinthians 8:1. By his sensuous mind, hypotou noste sarkosautou, the mind of the flesh, the same vocabulary we met in 2 Corinthians 10. Add the parts together and the picture is concrete. A person fascinated by detail about the unseen realm, in a tone that inflates the speaker, driven by the mind of the flesh, with the grip on the head loosening underneath. Paul names this as a spiritual problem of exactly the kind the adversary book most risks producing. He is not talking about a generic intellectual pride. He is talking about a specific failure mode of believers who study the unseen. Walk on. So here is the audit, said as plainly as the canon says it. The test of whether this book has been read rightly is not how much of the enemy's playbook you can now recite. It is not whether you can name the function before the name, or trace a trail from Origen to Milton, or distinguish the bound angels from the active demons, or quote Ephesians 6 from memory. Those are all good, and they are not the point. The test is whether you have come out of this reading more steadily attached to the head, less moved by the enemy's moves, and freer, or more fascinated, more afraid, and more impressed. The New Testament's own ratio is the standard. It spends few words cataloging the enemy, and many on the armor and the finished victory. A reader who now spends much on the enemy and little on the head has been moved by the very tactic this section is naming, using this book as the lever. The book itself was the bait. Whether it was the bait that caught is the question only you can answer. After walking this road, are you steadier in front of an accusation, or more agitated? Do you think about the figure less because his moves no longer move you, or more because the moves have begun to fascinate you? When a circumstance with a spiritual edge arrives, do you reach more naturally for the armor and the finished work, or for a new conviction about what specific demonic operation is in play? Has the kingdom incursion of the Gospels become more present in your prayer, or has the apparatus of the enemy become more present? Are you spending more time with the head, or more time with the field manual? The answers do not need to be perfect. They do need to be honest, because the wrong outcome here is the one Paul named, puffed up detail about the unseen realm, with the head's grip slipping underneath. If the audit comes out the wrong way, if you are thinking about him more, not less, if the playbook has become a thing you reach for, if you find yourself looking for darkness to engage rather than light to walk in, the way back is not complicated. Set this book down, pick up the Gospels, watch how Yeshua moves. He is not preoccupied with the figure. He casts him out and goes on. He does not give him a chapter. He answers him with one sentence and a quotation, and goes on. He does not stand before him in heated debate, and goes on. Walk where he walked. Spend a season reading nothing but the 4 Gospels and the letters, until the proportions of your attention have come back to where the New Testament's own proportions are. The road will still be here when you return, and if it has done its work, you will not need it again the way you needed it the first time. Walk on. And one last thing, this book owes the believer at the end of this movement, because the in-between is not lived in a study. It is lived in a world. The figure is on earth in great wrath, with his time short, and the believer we have been walking with is in that same world, and the obvious question is how to live in it without becoming it and without retreating from it. Yeshua answers the question precisely, and the answer is not what most of the church culture has reached for. Look closer. John 17:14-18. Not extracted, sent. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. The Messiah's own prayer for the believers, the night before the cross, is explicitly not a request for removal. He names the option and rejects it. I do not ask that you take them out. The answer to being not of the world is kept in it, not extracted from it. The believer is sent the same way the Son was sent, into, not away. The metaphors he gives elsewhere have the same shape. Salt that has to touch what it preserves, Matthew 5:13. Light that has to be in the room it lights, Matthew 5:14-16, John 1:5. Jeremiah's exiles are told to seek the welfare of the city where they were sent, not to assimilate to it and not to torch it, Jeremiah 29:7. And Paul shuts the escape hatch with a sentence that has done more pastoral work than its brevity should allow. To avoid the people of the world, you would need to go out of the world, 1 Corinthians 5:9-10. The world is the field. Salt that stays in the salt shaker is not yet salt. Light that stays under the bushel is not yet light. Walk on. This has two opposite failure modes, and they are the running pair in their final total life form. There is the assimilation error, friendship with the world, conformity, becoming what one was called out of, the drift that ends with a believer who is now indistinguishable from the field he was sent into. And there is the withdrawal error, the bunker, the holy huddle that abandons the field and calls fear holiness, the compound that engineers safety by removing salt from the meat it was supposed to preserve. The narrow path runs between them exactly as it does everywhere else in this body of work. In the world, not of it, sent, not extracted, salt that stays salt without leaving the meat. And so the road ends where it began, on purpose. It opened on the ground that does not move, the figure on a leash, the one on the throne, the cross at the center of everything. It closes here, on how the believer walks while standing on that ground. In the world, not of it, sent, equipped, watchful. End of section. Resisting from submission. Standing in the armor that is the ordinary furniture of an ordinary believer's ordinary life. Having done all, says the same verse one last time, to stand. Ephesians 6:13. Not to charge, not to hunt, not to specialize, not to fear, and not to hide. The returning child came home in the previous book. He was equipped for the 6 fronts in this one, and he is now sent back into the very world he was called out of. Not reassimilated, not bunkered, but as salt and light. The household does not bring the child home to keep him in the house. It equips him and sends him back into the field. That is the last word, and it is the whole point of every page before it.